Chris, Russia got a real shock, didn't it, when, oligarchs were way overstretched and oil was dipping to $30 a barrel. How did that feel for Russia?
Well, it was a real sense of panic. As you say, there had been 8 to 10 years of growth on the back of ever-rising oil prices, and also, of course, as became very clear in the crisis, on the back of accessing very cheap foreign currency debt. So the crisis in Russia provoked a real sense of panic, which we saw right through 2009. And only from the fourth quarter of last year, we can say that the government now has a grip on the situation. Of course, the oil price is a lot better and global growth is now back on track.
Yeah.
But the government is now much more focused on, if you like, on a revised growth strategy rather than firefighting, which was pretty much most of the previous 2 years.
So do you think that the government now actually have things in place? And I'd like to talk a little bit about what they are going to do rather than just relying, as you said, on a bounce in oil and what's going on in the rest of the world. What is the government specifically going to do to try and have a look at what's going on in Russia? Yeah,
I mean, to use that sort of dreadful cliche, wake-up call, but no question about it, the whole oil price collapse and global collapse did prove a big shock for the system. And last year we saw the government really sat down for probably the first time in 10 years to look at the situation, to look at what resources it had and to look at what needed to be done. Yeah. And in the midst of that, of course, we had that explosion in one of the big hydroelectric dams in Siberia. So the end result is that we now have a more pragmatic plan. For 2 years ago when Medvedev became president, it was a very elaborate plan to grow Russia. Now it's much more focused on what needs to be done, what are the essentials. So the buzzword in Russia right now is modernization, and the government is talking about how it needs to spend money on improving infrastructure, basic infrastructure, such as the electricity system, such as transportation, etc., and to reduce Russia's reliance on imported technology, imported food. So a much tighter plan that's more affordable and more achievable. So that at least is a positive. But still, of course, revenue stream and Russia's ability to follow through is still very dependent on the external environment, very dependent on oil, very dependent on global recovery.
And what about things like unemployment, which has been an issue, and also inflation, interest rates, all of those things? Are they coming secondary to the modernization drive, or are they going to be a part of it?
Well, part of it. I think the view taken by government is that they're all linked. If the government can kind of reinvigorate the economy by investing in these sort of core areas, then that can lead to sort of broader recovery, job creation, and say recovery in the other sort of consumer, retail, services sectors. We always knew that unemployment would peak around these levels, around 9%, which they are right now. Partly that's a seasonal factor, but we're beginning to see evidence, I have to say very fragile, but evidence nevertheless of recovery broadening out across the economy. We saw that in the February numbers, for example. So the hope obviously is that this, if the top-down recovery, sort of led by natural resources, if that spreads out, we can start to see unemployment coming down.
Just briefly before you go, Medvedev was very much considered to be a puppet when he came in. That doesn't really hold true anymore, does it? How's his power base now?
He's been very assertive particularly since last September, I feel like after this review period I mentioned, and he published an essay called Forward Russia, Go Russia, where he emphasized the need for modernization, and he's been very, very assertive since then, been much, say, clearer about what his objectives are. He's been tackling corruption, say, tackling some of these bigger issues in government. So no question about it, it's no longer a case of, this is Vladimir Putin's Russia, as it were. President Medvedev is now much more assertive.
Chris, pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks very much.